right now. But we have to have a little bit of a serious conversation. And that has to do with the fact that for many of us in this country today, who have had such strong feelings about internal dynamics, spiritual dynamics, emotional dynamics, psychological dynamics, have over the last few decades come to feel that politics is something so dark, so toxic, so brutal, that our own search, our own quest for that which is most wise and most true and most beautiful would lead us away from politics. Now, I grew up in a generation where the two were entwined in really beautiful ways. I mean, when I was growing up, we sang "All You Need Is Love" at political rallies. I've said this before. Most of the people at those rallies were stoned at the time, but that's the point is that after the assassinations of Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King, I think particularly the young people at Kent State, it's as though those who thought that the answers were internal went in one direction, and those who thought that the transformation of our society needed to continue to be an externalized form of activism, both social and political, sort of went another direction. And what's happening now, I think, is that those who are making an internal quest have come to realize that if we're to really be serious about this love stuff, it can't just stop at my life being okay. We have to now take it to the next step. I think if anything, if any impulse of this campaign, any impulse of this moment in history is true and real, it's that it's time for grown-ups to unite. I think people who are interested in the inner life and the spiritual realities and the idea that we are a part of a moral universe and there are deeper issues and questions than just me getting mine. What is my moral responsibility to my brother? What is my moral responsibility to the earth on which I live? What is my moral responsibility to other generations? And particularly, I think that we are coming to understand, at least I have. I feel it very strongly in my life, and I know many people I know feel it as well. You know, I'm a student of history. I've always loved to read about history, but I particularly read it through biographies, because when I understand what happens in the life of an individual going through a particular historical moment, then I understand it better. I've always been fascinated by the founding of this country, by the founders, and I'm particularly fascinated as a student of spiritual and mystical studies. I'm fascinated by the Great Seal of the United States, because the Great Seal of the United States, designed by Jefferson and Adams and Franklin, has a picture of the Great Pyramid at Giza. Can you imagine someone like Dick Cheney making as a Great Seal of the United States? A picture of the Great Seal at Giza. But it's more than that. It's that the Great Pyramid at Giza, on our dollar bill, ladies and gentlemen, on the Great Seal of the United States of America, on the top of the Great Pyramid at Giza, which in reality has lost its capstone. Archaeologists don't know. Egyptologists don't know. It's one of the great mysteries of history and archaeological lore. Where is the capstone of the Great Pyramid of Giza? They've never found it. Some archaeologists feel that it's somewhere in that causeway, for those of you who have been there, between the Sphinx and the Great Pyramid. Somewhere it must be buried. And in the great metaphysical traditions, it says that the wisdom of humanity is buried beneath the sands of Egypt. And what the tradition, the stories, the lore claim is that during a time when the Egyptian civilization was in decline, it is said that Egyptian priests went up, they climbed up to the top of the pyramid, and they removed the capstone to be buried until humanity had achieved enough in terms of its own evolutionary achievement to be able to return the capstone. That capstone had upon it the Eye of Horus, which means the all-seeing eye. Now, ladies and gentlemen, our founders in designing the Great Seal of the United States designed the Great Pyramid of Giza with the capstone back on. And they said underneath that in Latin, Novus Ordo Seclorum, New Order of the Ages. You know, when this country was founded, it was not just a great moment in political history. It was a great moment in philosophical history. It could never have occurred had it not been an outgrowth of millions of people's hearts who were absolutely, absolutely enthralled with the Enlightenment thinking of that time. The Enlightenment thinking of that time that said power would not just be based in the hands of a king, It would not just be based in the hands of a queen. It would not just be based in the hands of an aristocracy, their cronies. Power, real power, should be vested in the hands of anyone. 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 This was radical 200 years ago, and it is radical today. Now, obviously, many of them were slave owners. They themselves did not rise above, most of them, not all of them, did not rise above their own historical circumstances enough to say that that should also be women and it should also be people of color and that there should not be slaves and so forth. But the great process, the great narrative of American history has been a journey. It has been a philosophical journey as well as a political journey. And the narrative has been, generation after generation, those who felt that we should take this extraordinary principle of equality, this extraordinary principle that everyone was created equal by God. Everyone was created equal, and regardless of who your parents were, regardless how much money you have, regardless what your education or class, that you yourself had what it takes, that if you were educated and you had a free press so that you could know what was going on, then the power of this country should be vested in your hands. Now, there have been those in every generation who said, yeah, let's make this real. Let's make it not just white men who are landowners. Let's abolish slavery. Let's give the right to vote to women. Let's make this more and more true and manifest this great principle of equality, even unto this day, in the right for gay marriage. So our generation is no different than any other generation. That's the good news. You know, people don't come to see me usually because things are going well in their lives. People come to me for counseling and groups that I lead, often because things have not gone well. Somebody has died, somebody's gone bankrupt, somebody's child is in rehab, somebody's getting a divorce. And they kind of come to me at a time often when it seems as though the worst thing that could possibly happen has happened. And what I have seen, what I have had the privilege of seeing in my work, is that that's when people are often the most wise. When everything has fallen apart, they've realized they're an addict or they've lost everything. And I've seen such nobility and such wisdom and such beauty and intelligence in people. And I have felt that I understood what the founders meant. That place beyond externals, beyond money, beyond anything about the external world, that place inside people is where the governance of this country would be safely deposited, because that is what is most true about us. Well, I have a feeling, and it's often the same feeling I have when the people that I just described to you are sitting in front of me. Because sometimes they're there to hear the bad news. They're not looking for me to say, you know, your life fell apart, but I'm sure you did everything right. They're not looking to me to say, you know, everything's gone to hell in a handbasket, but I'm sure you had nothing to do with it. Because they know that I'm not going to tell them that. But they know that I'm going to say what 99% of the time in those situations I'm led to say, which is things are not good. Things are not going well, but you can change that. And so, ladies and gentlemen, my truth in terms of the history of this country is that even though on an external level, in the ways that we described, the democratic franchise being expanded for African Americans, the democratic franchise being expanded for women, the democratic franchise being expanded for gay people, the democratic franchise being expanded for so many people throughout our history. It is my belief that in ways that are very real and very deep and very true and very sinister and very insidious and very critical that we watch, there is a way, ladies and gentlemen, in which the democratic franchise is not being expanded today. It is being diminished, and perilously so, for the vast majority of Americans. and the lockout takes many forms. You know, the problem we have is that evil wears a happy face today. And the problem that we have is sometimes the people who are leading the forces that are most to be concerned about, the forces which do have to do with the sucking up of the vast material resources of our country, both economically and educationally, in terms of so many opportunities that matter and that should circulate throughout the society. Just as blood needs to circulate through the body, opportunity needs to circulate throughout a society, for the society as well as the body to be healthy. And some of the people who are actually fronting the very forces that have to do with the diminishment of the democratic franchise, they are wearing Gucci suits, you see. Now, I want to talk to you about this, because if you have an economic system in which short-term economic gain for just one section of our society is the bottom line, humanitarian values then are not the bottom line. If only short-term economic gain for the corporate sector is allowed to be our economic bottom line, then there is no room for anyone to get to say, but what about the children? There's no room for anyone to get to say, but what about the health of the earth? There's no room for anyone to get to say, what about the health of the society? What about the health of the air? What about the health of the water? What about the people? There's no room for that. There's no room for conscience. And if you have this ordering principle, if this ordering principle of only short-term economic gain is how you run your business, there is a place in which that is appropriate. But that is not an appropriate ordering principle for the United States of America. It is not the appropriate ordering principle for the people of the United States of America. And anytime you have any person or any system which has no remorse, which does not operate with remorse, does not operate with conscience,